Hey everyone, welcome back to another amazing session here at Observe. My name is Aparna, one of the co-founders here at Arize, and today we have a really special guest for you, probably one of the earliest companies to ever put LLMs into production, here to share their insights and what their journey was along the way. Saad, welcome to Arize Observe. Could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role at Jasper?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for having me and for putting on this really great event. So I lead the AI team at Jasper. This means the systems that host models and deploy them to customers. The modeling team, which improves models, fine-tunes models, uses models, and also the experimentation team. So that's my role here. And before this, I was at another AI company. I've also been in government, and even back then, we were investing in a lot of the R&D, which would culminate in the sort of things we're seeing now. So yeah, just it's a super exciting time. Super excited to be at Jasper.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you again for being here at Observe. Uh, I think everyone who's kind of followed Jasper's journey has been really intrigued about how how you've actually put LLMs into production. You're probably one of the first and early teams. Could you walk us through a little bit of what that journey looked like? When did you start, and where are you all today on that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And all the credit here just goes to the initial founders who were here before, like the later hired team was. So there were three co-founders, and they all kind of had like this marketing background. They've been teaching marketing classes, they've been doing marketing things together, and they were like very tight with their own marketing communities. So I think like the first thing that they had done really well was they focused on the customers that they knew and like the communities that they knew. It's very easy with the new technology, and even one is like as interesting and exciting as like these generative models, to get more fixated on like the model or the AI or whatever than it is like on what the customer wants and what they need. So I think the thing that they had done really well was they actually understood their customer, like marketers. They themselves had like some marketing experience. Um, they they emphasized the community. And anybody who's worked in any sort of like software company knows like cost of customer acquisition becomes this really key metric, but like social phenomena like groups and communities like help kind of mitigate the cost of customer acquisition. They really dig down there, but I don't think they even thought about it from that perspective, like cost of customer acquisition. I think they were just doing community building, and it just had a really good impact. And they were this early mover, so they were able to get a lot of folks into Jasper, and because they're focused on community and customers in that feedback loop, they're able to keep a lot of folks in Jasper.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And in the beginning, was there even AI as part of the product?
So I mean, definitely we're using GPT-3. It's built on that. But in terms of like Jasper doing its own artificial intelligence back then, I mean, there was prompt engineers. We're not sure if this is true or not, but like we think the first prompt engineer was one of our early employees, named James. He's great, but like sometimes you wonder, like, was he the first prompt engineer ever? And so we had folks in the platform who were doing prompt engineering, configuration, and they were using the model, like the API, but they weren't modeling themselves. It kind of goes back to the definition of like what does it even mean to be an AI, and like kind of like how does one interact with that. But at that phase, like they didn't have an AI team, like they didn't have people that were like modeling per se. We do now, and like we're really leaning into that. But back then it was using the model that they had via the API the best way that they could, which involved a lot of things, but it's not like getting into like PyTorch and doing training or anything.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And what was the first set of use cases that they used LLMs for?
So some of the more popular use cases back then, and also the first use cases were just these things that were enabled by templates. So like one-shot templates, like write me a blog article, write me a email subject line, write me a LinkedIn post. Like they were very popular. Some of these use cases, like generate for me a paragraph about this, were really popular. They also introduced a document editor, which also became popular. And but the document editor became popular not for the reason of it being a document editor, but because people wanted like a canvas to kind of play around with things, like generate something, edit it, like write a next sentence. So it was more of like a canvas than like how you would like typically use Google Docs. So those were definitely the two sets of really interesting use cases. But one of them was like templates, which gave people an opinionated version of the one-shot generation that they had wanted. Another one was like this document editor, blank slate canvas. they definitely got Jasper off the ground. And for what it's worth, the space is changing so quickly though. I think 1 or 2 years from now, we'll see like a completely different, or even like a couple months from now, we might see like a completely different set of use cases that are like driving Jasper and other companies like this.
Yep, got it. And so it sounds like in the beginning, you're starting with just calling, using GPT-3, calling APIs. Um, what, where are you all at today? What is that? I'm sure the architecture behind putting LLMs into production has changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
Uh, but could you walk us through what kind of, how did that change, and what were kind of some of the lessons you guys learned along the way?
There's so many lessons and there's so many things that are changing. It's hard to, even know how to start.
Mhm.
I mean, I think one is we definitely learned more about AI, but as I think a theme here is like more importantly, we learned more about how our customers would use AI and like what they actually wanted. So things that you wouldn't expect. Yeah, I read through like a lot of customer feedback and just trying to understand, what they're doing and how they're doing it and what the customers need. So does everybody else in Jasper as well. But we for example, we realize like they like being pithy sometimes. Other times they like verbosity. But like when you think about verbosity and like just like really long, flowery like outputs, it's not what you would want to output yourself. It's not what a reader would want to read. So we realized like, okay, the way that they're using the generative model is actually to give them like brainstorming fodder, and then they're gonna like cut it out from there and do something else with it. Because it's easier to cut down a generation than it is to like add your own thing to it. They're looking for ease of use is another way of saying it. But not all the time either, it depended per use case. We also found like a lot of people who, English was their second language, were using it to produce English. We also saw people were not just generating new things, but they were remixing older things. Like they wanted to take their old thing they wrote 2 years ago and just like update it with new information, or they wanted to like write it for like a different sort of audience. So like remixing like became a different type of like use case. So I think like the big things we were learning were about our customers and how they were interacting with this new technology. And I even the team and I talk about this all the time. Like we'll do experiments and A/B tests, and like some might think of that as like model evaluation or content evaluation, but it's more of like customer discovery. Like why did they use it this way? Because so often we'll have something that's objectively a better content output. Like it's better English, it has more information, the information was more, it was like factually more correct and rich. And it would have, made an English professor do a backflip, like so good. But the customer just won't like it. And so like we like just learning about the customer. I mean, in terms of learning about the AI, like we haven't been like ultra surprised where the space has gone. We kind of expected it. Of course, it would get better at semantics. Of course, it would get larger context windows. Of course, it would become a little bit more multimodal. Like these were like known roadmap items. So that's actually progressing kind of like how we expected it. But customers are still more complicated than like a lot of the AI, and so we're still trying to figure that out.
Got it. In this world, how do you even evaluate your models then? I mean, we've been kind of hearing about our users or folks we're talking to are talking about either LLM assisted evaluation, user feedback, or a little bit more of these task-based NLP type of metrics like Rouge or Blue. What metrics do you all use internally to evaluate the models?
Yeah, so it goes back to like one of those timeless design principles, form follows function. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to get something that the customer likes. And so what's the best way to do that? We of course have these like, maybe you can call them like customer facing success metrics, longer session time, session length. Did they give the thing a thumbs up or thumbs down? Did they like copy and paste it? And of course you have to like make sure that those things are like statistically significant. We have to make sure that we set up the experiments the right way, whether it's an A/B test, whether it's a time series, it's continuity or what have you. But those metrics tell us maybe what's working, not even guaranteed. So they maybe tell you what's working, but that doesn't really, so, okay, so that something's working better than something else. And that something is content. It's a blob of text or
Yeah.
maybe some images or maybe
Yeah.
text and images. Does that mean that you can even use that or scale that insight? I don't think so, because we still don't know why. Like, was it because there's so many different things happening within a blob of text? Like, it's longer, it's shorter, it's more semantic, less semantic. Tone was this way, it was happy, it was sad. There's not a million, but there's a lot of variables within any blob of content. And so then we have to go back and figure out what are the metrics associated with that blob versus the other, chunk of text. All those things I just said. Was it more semantic? Was it less semantic? Was it longer, shorter? Was it pithier, not pithy? What did it do? Fact retrieval better or worse? How many fact sources did it get? We have to like kind of quantify those metrics, and they're driven by hypothesis. Like, what do we think our customers will like more? What is the qualitative feedback telling us? We turn those into metrics, and then I think the golden kind of thing is when we can correlate the what metrics with the why metrics, the customers are spending a longer time looking at this content. That's what's happening. It's not necessarily even good because maybe they're spending a longer time because it is taking a longer time for them to find the right thing. Maybe they're spending a longer time because they love it more. We have to figure that out too. But once we figure out that's what's happening and it's a good thing, we have to figure out, okay, why did that happen? They're spending a longer time with the content because the content was richer. Okay, so now and they liked it. So now we know we need to make richer content for these use cases. Or maybe they were spending a longer time because the language was like more academic and they were just struggling with it more. And then we actually found that in the long run, this caused attrition. Well, then we have to do less of that. Or maybe we do less of that for that use case or maybe for that user base. So it's a lot of moving parts. I probably overcomplicated it just now. Another axiom or principle is just keep it simple too. Like sometimes like the top 5 or 10 motions will account for like 80% of like the insight you need to get value.
Got it. And so it sounds like the biggest, at least, focus is that user feedback, even just like getting, and it sounds like there's a lot of different ways you guys can slice it, which is like length, pithy, verbosity. There's the simple stuff like thumbs up, thumbs down, but it sounds like the focus is around user feedback. Do you use any LLM assisted evaluation at
Yeah,
Jasper?
absolutely. And I think that's also like rising. We do user-facing tests. User-facing tests has the metrics I mentioned before, and we'll try to correlate it with like LLM-assisted metrics too. So some like, for example, semantic scores. You can use a T5 model to come up with various semantic scores, and then we record those for each content item, and then we'll correlate those with like what actually happened in the customer-facing experiments. But also, you don't want to like put everything to production and publicly test it as well. So sometimes we will actually test the models. We'll come across a new model. We'll come up with it. We'll fine tune a model ourselves. And we already knew, hey, for this use case, we wanted something that was more semantic. And like none of the current models are like that semantic plus that much like fact retrieval. It's usually like 2 or 3 things at once, and we're trying to like triangulate a trade-off. So because sometimes like you'll sacrifice semantics if you get better fact recall. Sometimes you'll like less hallucination and more facts can be associated with like less creativity or like less or even like less semantics. And so often like optimizing a trade-off between 2 or 3 different metrics. For those metrics, before we move them to production, because like why do that if you can just do it internally like through some automated scripts? We will use like LLM enabled metrics. Like the T5 is a very good model for that because it's so like instruct fine-tuned. But there's options too.
Got it. That is super interesting. And do you use any of the kind of, we call it rouge, blue, LP metrics, or any learnings from using those
Informative.
metrics?
There's those metrics. There's like benchmarks, like Google's Big Bench and a couple of others. They're definitely useful, but it's kind of like what's a good analogy? Like when you it's like you don't like start riding a bike by like going dirt biking all of a sudden. Sometimes like all those extra steps and lessons can be distracting. Unless you've like mastered like what your customers' needs are and like how to tie those metrics to them. Those metrics, they're like a lot of them are like technical metrics, technical tasks, and they're telling you information, but it might not be valuable unless you're able to tie that to your customer. So I found that like 80% of folks who like use those models are like either not customer focused or like those metrics will distract them from actually what does matter. So I'm not saying they're bad. They're very useful and they're good for like comparable, like just comparables up front. But unless one is able to tie them back to their customer, what the customer is actually looking for, they just might not be the most useful things.
Got it. Super interesting. So now you have metrics. So you guys are putting LLMs into production. You have kind of developed a pattern of or approaches around how you want to evaluate these models. What do you see internally, at least, kind of your best approaches at fixing or getting better responses? Do you guys start off first with prompt engineering and try to change up your prompt templates? Is that kind of the first path you go down when you notice some responses are weird for a certain use case? Do you fine tune?
Yeah.
What's kind of that? When do you know when to do what?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to answer this question. One is like the micro response of looking just at like a model output, but then there's
Yeah.
a more macro answer, I think, of like looking at the customer experience. So
Okay.
the micro thing is, yeah, of course, like prompt engineering has a lot of changes. Like prompt engineering is, it gets like a lot of uh, a good prompt versus a bad prompt, or a thoughtful prompt versus a not thoughtful prompt can be the difference between complete garbage and like something very valuable.
Yeah.
Um, there's other parameters too, like looking at things like temperature and so on and so forth. We found this generally like like you can optimize that away, automate that away, and it's like not such an active consideration anymore. Um,
But
uh,
was that important for you all in the beginning? I know that
maybe a
you
little bit. It had like a little bit, but back when those were the main levers, like it was more important. But now that like you can automate some of that away, and also because there's so many more levers, it's just like not the most important thing a lot of the time. The models are also getting better at like following instructions, and like that means like some of like the uncertainty and lack of control that the earlier models had uh is solved. So like there's like less daylight between,
got it.
like it's better at understanding your instruction now. And if it's not, you can you can have a model that translates your prompts into the right prompt that the model could understand. Then like there's so many different ways to automate all that away. But I think the more I think like the broader thought is that um it goes back to one of the things that we were kind of chatting about earlier as well. Like this is called generative AI, but that's not all I can do. Like they're actually just like logic machines, and like they're pieces in a puzzle. I would say actually like my one big message is um don't think in models, like think in systems, like think in terms of like broader artificial intelligence. Your brain doesn't just have one piece, it has like multiple pieces that work together to do like different diverse tasks. And I
Mhm.
think there was this phase where we're all like focused on the model, but I think that those days are gone. And it's more interesting to think about the system. So like if we look at it from the perspective of customer experience, the question doesn't become how do we get more out of the model? The question becomes how do we make a better experience? And what do we use to do that? And it could be models, it could be a vector database, it could be, it could be a recommender system and a model together doing something new and unique. Like one of the problems or puzzles that we're really interested in these days is like, how do you get the most value for the least amount of work from the customer? Which means take them out of prompting altogether. How do you create an experience that's just much more dynamic, that like they go from all of the memory and retrievability that they might have had in their own databases to getting some outputs, and then remixing the outputs like as fast as possible, making it a really easy native experience. Like when Netflix came out, like binging series became more of a thing. Like it was a new mode with a new medium with a new mode. So like generative AI is like a new medium, and I think it can have a new mode as well. So looking at just the outputs of the single model, it doesn't take into account like that broader canvas of possibility that we actually have here.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That's a great way of thinking about it. Can you give me, you know, some examples of what you mean by the system? Like, don't just think about it from the model, but can you give me some examples of system? And earlier, I know we were talking about you all were doing chaining before chaining was even popular. Like, how, what comprises of that system
Yeah.
that you think about when you're deploying LLMs into production?
Yeah, so let's talk about like e-commerce, for example, because it's non-competitive with Jasper and I won't get in trouble. And
Yeah.
so and so like let's just say that you're like, Jeff Bezos 2.0. And I don't mean like you're going to become like the person Jeff Bezos, but like you're trying to start in like the e-commerce. Like you're seeing an opportunity in this new bit in like generative AI.
Yeah.
And you want to create like you want to rethink e-commerce, for example.
Yep.
Um let's
So
just
when you first start, you just start with, calling you have a use case. Is it recommending products? Do you first start off with just calling GPT-3 or GPT-4 with an API? What happens next?
I know. So like flipping that and just looking at it from like a customer's perspective. Let's just say that you did a bunch of customer interviews, and you realize that there's a group of people who never got into Amazon because they hate searching for product descriptions. They like the experience of like going through a store, getting recommendations, and let's call these like, there's a segment of like, and I'm making this up. Let's say there's
Yeah.
a segment of like passive customers that like just hate like online shopping. So you want to make a solution for them because they're not on Amazon, and like you think they're like good, ready to go. And you also find that what these people like, the reason that they hate shopping in general is because they'd rather spend their time doing more valuable things. So your goal becomes, let me create an experience for them where I sell them something still, but like they view it as intrinsically valuable. So like your product solution was, I want to create like essentially like a customized, a customized like blog article for these folks, each one of them every single week, where it's like somehow I learn maybe from their calendar, like integrate with the calendar, that they're going to go on like a hiking trip, they're going to go on a business trip, they're going to like, they have they have kids or whatever, and like you want to create like a blog article for them that tells them some really engaging, interesting thing, but then also it'll like put in some like links to something that they want to say, hey, you're going to Yosemite next week. Here's a future itinerary that you would love, like based on your history and based on, blah, blah, blah. And like, here is like a product you should get. So in the back end, like the system for that, what it would look like is, you would have understood that they're going to Yosemite from some sort of integration. And then you also, maybe from just simply like their like email address. Let's just say that they work on, let's just say their email is something like, at, walmart.com, that they're a Walmart employee. So just simply from those two pieces of information, you can then train like a model to an agent to go out and say, hey, give me some demographic data from people from Walmart or whatever. And like, let's build a customer profile for them, a Walmart employee, like, and they're maybe like male, they're age 30, blah, blah, blah. And then like, let me build a profile for them. And then also let me, understanding that they're going to Yosemite, let me like create a blog article that's geared to selling to a Walmart employee of this demographic. Give me like a perfect Yosemite itinerary for this person, and then give me, and then maybe you have like a recommender engine and something that's tied to your e-commerce store, and tell them like what are two products that they would likely buy? What are the two products that they're most likely buy? Integrate those two products into it. So you're hiking on Yosemite, you go El Capitan, you're so lucky and happy that you wore these boots, and like this is sneaked in there, and so the person like loves that they're getting this itinerary. They love that it's like customized to them. I know there's a bit of a hype about like images, like put the person in the image of the thing. I think that's not a bad idea, but I also think it's kind of expensive. Just
Yeah.
per, like per inference, but maybe it works out. But like you just do some sort of like effective thing that like, it was very little work for the customer. You built a system of like, you see, like you use the model to retrieve some information, you use it to put together something. You had then you had a model that was like generating a LinkedIn thing that, product description that was targeted to the audience. And then you like inserted you maybe like, inserted into the prompt some of the product descriptions that you had wanted. And like, you're building more of a system. There's an MVP scrappy version of that too, that you can probably hack together in a couple of days, couple of weeks, maybe, in a couple of days, hopefully. And then like you validate that, and you go from there, and then you eventually scale, and like developing the whole system where you like automate all of that, and just doing that would come after you validate it, that this is what the customer actually wanted. The metrics you'd be looking for, like, did this sell more? Like, is it like, what's
Mhm.
the ROI on this? Like, if people were using the system, would it sell more for the segment than like browsing on Amazon, where like maybe people get fatigue and like they just don't want to do it anymore, or even getting recommendations of like 20 different things on Amazon. And so and you go from there. So the system would be designed, if form follows function. We're trying to develop these customized experiences for people that they enjoy, and we're trying to sell something. So like, we have those two forms, those two functions, and then we backwards think about the most efficient system to get there. So I probably didn't describe it super efficiently, but you're combining retrieval agents, purporting, you're doing a cold start problem with like some minimal information. You're serving them the output of that through an, generated by an LLM. Then you're measuring, maybe you're A/B testing, which, I give them 2 to 3 different styles of blog article, which one they like more. Then you're using some metrics to kind of optimize. So something like that. It would differ for like every use case.
Got it. That was really, really helpful. Okay, I'm gonna change gears here because I know we're getting close on time. Um, Build your own versus using an off-the-shelf model. Where is Jasper headed? Why? When would you? When does it make sense to? Yeah, taking aside things like privacy and security, when does it make sense to um, maybe build your own?
Yeah. First of all, I think different companies are like, they have different like ethoses, and they're all fine. AI first, AI second, AI third, maybe. So I think for like a lot of AI second companies, like, you don't have your own AI team. Like, you're just trying to get started, and you want a lot of value from this. do the easiest thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like don't necessarily build it. Don't even try to fine tune an open source thing. Don't get caught up in the hype. Like use some API. The APIs are getting pretty good. And go forward from there. There's probably a bunch of companies too that, like, for regulatory reasons, like banks and medicine and so on, they'll have to like fine tune or build their own and keep them in-house, like for just for some of these, some other reasons. So it's easier for most companies to do that. There's a lot of great companies like Hugging Face, which like provide services to AI second companies as well.
yep,
Which is great. No, in terms of like, in terms of like, why would you want to build your own? You'd want to build your own because there's a need that there's a customer need the model to serve that's not being met by these open source things. Like that would be the one main reason. That's true a lot of the time. I don't think it's going to be that true for semantics because these models are getting really good at semantics. But it might be truer for like tool use and like complex tool use. So like there was this really good papers on tool use, starting with the tool former paper about like the models like using tools. This kind of gets us into the agent space, but I can see some instruct fine tuning there, or even some model creation there being very, very useful.
yeah,
You could also do like domain specificity too, but I think that's not necessarily, I don't know, fine tuning or model creation is the best way to solve that either.
yeah. Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. In your case, does the need for hyper personal responses, like, is that kind of what would drive someone to build their own?
I think like if you think about the AI system, the question would become like, how do you use the AI system to get that hyper personalization? And then building your own would come to, I built the system and I did the easiest things. I did the prompting, I looped the two models together. And if you're still not getting the value the customer wanted, then you could think about like fine tuning a model. I don't think that like fine tuning or training a model is useful for like point cases. Actually, I think it's much more useful for a generalizable case that like, you're benefiting from versatility, the versatility of the model. And, those are a better use of like training and fine tuning your own model. But then the question becomes like, why is it that the current model providers didn't give you that?
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. Last question for you, and then I think we're out of time. Um, what advice do you have for data scientists, up and coming data scientists? Do they all become prompt engineers? Like, where does that role go? And any advice for them?
Yeah, I think three quick ones. I think it's a changing space, and probably like all advice will be bad. And so
Yeah.
like one is like have your own standard. Like keep your ears to the ground, look at the space, and then like think broadly and like optimize for where you think things might go. Second thing is also like I think some things will be timeless. Like experimentation will be timeless. Being able to like work in PyTorch. I mean PyTorch and some of these frameworks will be timeless. And good methods are timeless too. So like don't stick with those things as well. And maybe the third thing is I would say 80% of maybe modelers and data scientists are focused on like single models and in single things, but there's a relative dearth of like, people who think in systems. I think thinking in systems will be like empowering, and it's a no risk move.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, this was an amazing session. I feel like I walked away learning a lot. And thank you for just sharing a bit of that journey that you all went through at Jasper. It's, you know, I think many companies are probably going to go through that over the next couple of months and years here. And yeah, it's amazing to just share kind of what you all have been through. Any closing words before we wrap up the session?
Um, I think starting an AI company is hard, and I think starting an AI company or any company that does anything good, like in education or like the nonprofit sector, is even harder. So just like kudos and encouragement to anybody who's trying to use this new technology for something good. I love and believe in both those things. And not everything that's possible is inevitable. So like just thanks to people who are working in that space. There was a startup that like was providing LLM enabled services for for people with visual impairments. I just like really respect that stuff. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you to those sort of companies.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Saad. Thanks for being here at Observe, and we'll hop into hope you stick around and watch some of the other amazing sessions here today.
Thank you.